It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
Welcome! Hey, everybody! Welcome in. My name is Chris, and this is a show about molecular physics and also football, mostly molecular physics. Hello there, everybody. Oh, my goodness. We are back. We're back from break. Thank you so much for being a possum. I love you. I missed you. Of course, if you're in the yacht club, you've been hearing from me regularly on Mondays. But everybody else, it's been a while. We had 3 weeks off. Then we did a couple of free agency shows. Then we had 2 more weeks off. But now we are back in your ear holes on Thursdays for the next 6 weeks in a row. Football in April. What the heck is there to talk about in April? Well, buddy, there's the NFL draft, about which I basically know squat. So these next 3 shows, guess what? This is my chance to learn. We're going to have 3 straight weeks of a draft expert on this little podcast that could, and hopefully these folks will be talented enough to get me up to speed on the skill position names that we need to know among the rookies, who will then, of course, probably be drastically overvalued in fantasy drafts this summer, but we will at least know their names. So that begins today. Very excited to get going. Now, in the time since I last spoke to you on this main show, not that much news in the NFL, but one very big item. And Andy Behrens and I discussed it at length this past Monday on the Yacht Club show. But I think it bears retakeifying here. Jalen Waddle gets traded from the Dolphins to the Broncos, which happened after we did our big free agency reaction show a few weeks ago. Interestingly, the receiver market still not barren. As of my recording this, Juwan Jennings, the most hated man in the NFL, still available. Stephon Diggs, still available. Christian Kirk, Deebo Samuel, David Njoku, if that's how you float your boat. Brandon Ayuk, not quite available yet, as the 49ers put out anxious statement after anxious statement, desperately trying to convince the world that, hey, you know what? Actually, there's still a chance Ayuk might play for us again, despite the fact that we stopped just short of tarring and feathering him and calling him unprofessional last year. Sure, maybe we'll keep him unless someone wants to, trade for him. But anyway, Jalen Waddle was a name we, of course, did not know would be on the move. And going from Malik Willis and the Dolphins to Sean Payton, Bo Nix, and the Broncos, I would say, honestly, fantasy-wise, maybe something of a lateral move from 30,000 feet. I might anticipate, probably a more functional offense situation. We try not to get too carried away thinking we know situations beforehand. Denver's offense was better than Miami's last year. Miami obviously being run by different people now. Malik Willis could be okay. The room looks more crowded with other good wide receivers in Denver, so I don't think I could look at it and immediately proclaim this is like some, wow, Jalen Waddle goes 4 rounds higher because of this. But it doesn't feel like a downgrade in situation. Waddle himself is a very fast player. It's funny, when Andy and I talked about this trade on Monday, Andy said that his first impression was like, hey, amazing, so excited. I think you're going to get a lot of 1-yard passes to Jalen Waddle, and he's going to make a lot of plays. And I didn't think of it. That was interesting. My initial reaction was not that, but the more I thought about it, the more I think Andy makes a good point. Waddle himself in Miami wasn't really a screen guy. Even with the highly compromised Tua of the past couple of years, like last year, Waddle had 14 catches of 3 air yards or less. So that was not what immediately came to mind for me. But then Andy's right. Marvin Mims had 25 such catches last year. Troy Franklin had 27. I guess I have some skepticism that Waddle overall has really ever been, quote unquote, elite receiver. That does linger for me. So I think, I think when I eventually wind up doing ranks in May, probably I'm going to try not to get too far out over my skis on him, but I'm also not going to sit here and say Marvin Mims or Troy Franklin are at his level, at least not yet. So, if those do turn into a bunch of short Waddle plays where, nobody's going to argue. If the offense is built around 50 one-yard passes to Jalen Waddle over the course of a season, he's real fast after the catch. That could add up to a more reliable weekly baseline than I maybe initially imagined. And so, good hat tip to Andy. I guess what I was trying to express on Monday is that it just does seem like a lot of guys. Maybe Mims becomes a full-time special teams guy. Maybe he's just gone. But Lil Jordan Humphrey is going to be locked in with Sean Payton when they're both in the old folks' home. And Troy Franklin is there, a fourth-rounder in 2024, caught 65 passes in kind of a good year last year. Pat Bryant is there, third-round pick in 2025, and really fast, had some moments that tantalized us last year. And of course, I assume for the moment that Waddle's acquisition didn't really change the fact that Cortland Sutton will be there with 1 year left on his deal, at least in which he's making a lot of guaranteed cash. So it could be that we get a trade. Sutton gets traded away. Not impossible, but unless that happens, he's going to be there too. Obviously, you're never going to get the too many mouths to feed argument out of me, even when it's Bo Nix under center. If you're good enough as a receiver, you will eat in the NFL. But it's also not like, Stephon Diggs last year joining a team that had Kayshon Boutte and like third year never was Pop Douglas and rookie who can't play Kyle Williams. Denver already had a receiving core that produced well and had players that we like. And two of those young pieces, Bryant and Franklin, I think until Waddle showed up, people would have said they have pretty good futures ahead of them. So I don't think they completely disappear. They are certainly rendered useless for fantasy, at least from the perspective of right now. And I think Sutton himself probably gets a little more of the side eye, but he does kind of do a different thing, Sutton does, than the others. I'm not the guy who's going to, look at a spreadsheet and divvy up the targets, because you know what's going to happen. Someone's going to get hurt, and then the order of things gets changed. But yeah, I'm not going to say I'm positive Jalen Waddle suddenly becomes some automatic third-round fantasy pick, which, of course, I have no idea if that's where ADP is going to put him, because ADP at this time of year, I don't look at. It's best ball-based and garbage. I would say please don't pay attention to it right now. It'll be interesting to see, though, in the summer what the market does. I do understand the upside Andy was talking about. I still might be a little cooler on Waddle, but there's lots of time to ponder. What's left behind in Miami? Nothing at the moment. Are you a big Tutu Atwell enthusiast? Do you love Jalen Tolbert and Terrace Marshall? Yeah, none of those. That room certainly is going to be getting new players, maybe in the draft. Maybe one of those unsigned veterans I mentioned earlier. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, any more time, in fact, doing analysis. There'll be lots of time to talk about the Dolphins when we do know the names. There is also one other aspect of the Waddle trade, which is the price. And I'm not going to open that can again, because on the Yacht Club, Andy and I spent a good long while talking about how this might affect A.J. Brown's speculative departure from the Eagles. Does it potentially make the cost for Brown higher? The price starts at a first-round pick and more? Or is the fact that Jalen Waddle has a much more reasonable contract, does that mean that the price is not involved? Or maybe Waddle's price is even the ceiling for Brown? If you'd like to hear that conversation, which, as I said, we spent a good 10-15 minutes on, I will give you a plug to join the Yacht Club. It's $5 a month. We are making a weekly show all year long with Andy Behrens. I will still do Film Futures or whatever it's called on this main show here and there, but this winter we've already done a bunch of them. Andy and I both watching film together on the Yacht Club. We've done Jackson Dart, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas, Bashal Tutin. We even did A.J. Brown. We talked about what we thought he had left this week on the show, about, 20 2025 AJ Brown being mad but still being good. So if you're interested in the Yacht Club, you can find out more at harrisfootball.com.
Today's kickoff.
Okay, on today's show, did I mention it's draft talk time? Oh, yes it is. And to kick us off, we are going to have a look at the wide receiver prospects for the 2026 NFL Draft. We got a great one. It'll be Matt Waldman joining us here on the show. His rookie scouting portfolio is out. It's once again spectacular and well worth your hard-earned dollars as well. So Waldman on the wideouts, that's the rest of today's show, and I thank you again so much for listening today. A brand new sponsor today, it is Fume, F-U-M, and if you or someone you love is trying to quit smoking or vaping, this one is for you. Fume is a flavored air device, simple, natural, and kind of genius, no nicotine, no batteries, no vapor at all. Just a weighted, kind of like twisty, fidget-friendly tool that gives you something better to reach for when cravings show up. It is hard to quit. You know, the kids start young. We maybe developed a habit with it we don't love during COVID or since we've been working from home. Fume is really worth a try if you're trying to quit. Instead of giving into a craving, grab your Fume and interrupt the old pattern. It really makes a difference. Having something healthier that controls that need to fidget. They got multiple flavors. Hey, Fume has already helped 700,000 people develop better habits. If you or someone you love wants to quit smoking or vaping, go to tryfume.com, TRYFUM.com, and use the code Harris. You'll get a free gift when you try the Journey Pack. This works. Get healthier. Give it a try. Tryfume.com, TRYFUM.com, and use that code Harris.
Today's guest.
The scouting days are here again as the draft day fever grows. Prospects to scour, prospects with power, prospects the RSP knows. His tape is alright, his hips are too tight, he's overrated by far. Who'll be productive, not just seductive.
And today's guest, you know what that song means. It is that time of year. We are actually going to learn some stuff about the NFL Draft, and to help me with that, the first day's worth, it is, as he's done for probably about a decade, it is Matt Waldman. You can, most importantly, get the rookie scouting portfolio. That's basically going to be the basis of which we discuss these prospects today, the RSP. Matt Waldman, how many, I've lost track, how many years have you written the RSP?
This is going on, this is the 21st year, so since 2006.
Yeah, so this thing is long developed. Matt has a formula. It's incredible. It's great. I will just say this, from what I've read, it only just came out a couple days ago, the first edition, so it hasn't been in my hands long. We're talking about receivers today, so mostly what I've read is receiver profiles. But I have to say, this is maybe the most hostile I've ever read you being to the NFL Combine, which just makes me love you so much.
I guess it just gets worse every year with some of the things, and it's really it's just part of it is, you know, one of my podcast partners is Brandon Angelo, and he is a former track athlete, and he trains NFL athletes. He usually helps rehab a lot of athletes in different sports, including the NFL. And he was a running back at Purdue, I believe, for a little bit. But Brandon, the first show we ever did, we talked about why, like, the NFL is using like a second or third rate timing device to record to time like the 40 and all the different timed events, and the differences between these technologies, and basically the variation rate, you know, with each thing that's run. And the variation rate is basically the difference between being a first round pick and a free agent. So, I mean, it's like, what are we doing here, people? You know, but so when I look at that kind of thing, or the history of looking at a Dalvin Cook and seeing that, like, I kind of started to learn my lesson with Dalvin Cook because when everybody who was like a spark fiend and a combine fiend was like, Dalvin Cook's not any good because his 3-cone drill's bad. And I'm like, the 3-cone drill is measuring something that Dalvin Cook specifically doesn't do when he runs the football. So why are you even applying it? So yeah,
I mean, to say nothing of the fact of how much time you personally spend watching so much film on hundreds of players, and then you're going to change your mind because somebody, stumbled in a 40-yard dash. Olympics.
Exactly. I mean, it's good. It's a good layer of information to use as a reference to see if it confirms what you've watched, and if it doesn't, go back and make sure that you weren't asleep while you were watching one of these players. And but it's generally not something that it's like, what would we say? Harold Fannin last year is a perfect example. Like, Harold Fannin ran stuff like Sam Laporta did, but because everybody loved Harold Fannin before the combine and he didn't hit the relative athletic score percentiles, rather than, they suddenly all abandoned ship on him. And you can see what he did last year. And relative athletic score is a percentile. I'd rather know what's the minimum number to be considered a good starter or a contributor in the league than knowing, well, he was the 32nd percentile in the history of guys done. I'm like, okay, that's nice to know, if you want to say how good or how bad it was relative to other players. But if all the other players that we're looking at, if he's in the 30th percentile, but you only need to be in the 14th percentile to actually be a starting caliber player in the league with that level of speed, what do I care? And what should you care? That's the whole point.
It's just this quest for a grand unified theory of data that allows people not to do any work. I need a spreadsheet because I don't know if you know this, but watching film on hundreds of guys is really hard. That takes a long time. If I have a spreadsheet, I can go have a picnic.
Yeah, that's true. And if you just have one spreadsheet, I have got like 6. So and they're all up, they're all open at one time while I'm watching film. So I understand if I only could have one spreadsheet, I might feel better too.
So it's MattWaldmanRSP.com is the place to find the rookie scouting portfolio. It's just everybody who gets it is overwhelmed by how great it is and how well it prepares them for what the rookies look like and what Matt thinks of them. He's an iconoclast in that he doesn't really care what your rank is. He doesn't care about the consensus ranks. He comes up with his best guess, and we all make mistakes, and there are guys you get and there are guys you don't. But you're going to get Matt's unvarnished opinion. It's not going to be filtered through the lens of I don't want to look too far out on this player. Like, no, it's his opinion. And he certainly has done the work to back it up. And today he's here to talk with me about the class of 2026 wide receivers. I gave you the choice of any of the skill positions for today because you're the first up, as you always are. You're the leadoff hitter of our NFL draft coverage. You picked wide receivers. My understanding from having read the wide receiver section is that the reason you did was because you like this class. It's maybe not quite as top heavy or at least perceived of as having multiple super elite players, but it's at least as deep, if not deeper, than the past couple of receiver classes.
Absolutely. And I think that's what happens is people look at the class and they want to judge how many first round and second round picks there are because they feel like those are the guaranteed starters year one and those are the guaranteed good players. But we know that there are a lot of players that come out of day 2, day 3, and occasionally even undrafted guys who make an impact. And I think that this is a class that has just as many players who should be able to make rosters and contribute on a statistical level as last year. It's just that maybe there's, maybe 1 to 2 less players that you're looking at that you would project could be starters who you might put in a redraft situation for fantasy. And so that may make it less appealing right now, but down the line in a year or two, it might be as good or better than last year's class.
So your clear number one, I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth from having read, I think your clear number one is Carnell Tate. And he's the one who stands apart as being, up there with the best of the past several years. When you're comping him to Justin Jefferson, that is, we both love Justin Jefferson very much. So that is, I'll say this. I don't know anything about anything. I know Carnell Tate's name. I'm stupid, but I'm at least smart enough to know that people have been kind of like, I wish it was Jeremiah Smith's year and not Carnell Tate's year, because Jeremiah Smith is really the one. And seeing your evaluation of Carnell Tate as like, dude, this guy could be Justin Jefferson was kind of an eye opener to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I remember back in the day when they wished that it was Terrace Marshall who was picked in the first round, and how he was so much better than Justin Jefferson. We didn't even talk about Justin Jefferson until the combine. At least, I mean, the people who were in my community, oftentimes they weren't talking about him. They were talking about how good Terrace Marshall was, and no. I mean, Justin Jefferson was a complete player. It's just that the guys who get the box score numbers for whatever reason in terms of how the offense is used, that can be part of it, or the acclaim and buzz that the player got out of high school. And Tate is he has excellent technique with his routes, with his releases. He is better after the catch than he's credited for. And he is and as far as catching the football, I mean, it is peerless. I mean, well, not peerless, but I would say he and Makai Lemon both have excellent technique in this class, but they both stand apart in terms of how consistent they are at being able to catch the ball over their heads and have their hands together, which is kind of the hardest position to be able to do that well. Even guys in the NFL repeatedly have issues with that. But I mean, Tate is more than fast enough to win outside. And I know that again, the combine, they had him at 4.53, and all the scouts were like, well, we had him timed about 0.2 of a second less than that. And like a bunch of them had that, again, error rates with the machine. And I know that humans have error rates too, but when a bunch of them are all coming out saying we had him about between 0.2, 0.25 less than what was timed. And also depends, is he working on learning to become a better football player or a better track athlete? There's a difference there in terms of, are you gaming the system? So he's someone I think will likely play split end in the NFL rather than flanker. And, split end's the one that's really tight to the line, depended on more often to go deep. His positioning is great on the ball. The routes breaking inside and outside or downfield are very strong. He knows how to set up defenders well. And, there are people who prefer Makai Lemon more, and I think Makai Lemon's an excellent prospect as well. And we'll be talking about him next. But he's, people use the whole, well, he's going to play in the slot and he can also be a flanker. But if we're going to talk about NFL trends for a second, if we look at more and more teams that are adopting 2 and 3 tight end sets, and as a response to defenses playing all of this, cover 2, cover 3, and the personnel on defenses have now become lighter and faster to be able to handle spread offenses, well, then the natural evolution for the offense to counter is to go bigger and to run the ball to set up the pass. And now how many teams are going to really need a slot receiver? And I think Lemon's at his best in the slot, but if he can be a good flanker, and I think that but if I were to pick Carnell Tate as an outside receiver versus Makai Lemon as an outside receiver, I'm taking Tate. And if I'm now if Lemon gets into a situation where he can be the inside guy, and a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets, teams may put their tight end outside when they do some of this work, and so Lemon still works from the slot. Then I can understand where some people might feel like Lemon has a little bit more fantasy appeal, and it might be a tight race between him and Tate because of the volume that Lemon might get. But I would say just because of the way trends are going, and also just the overall, scores that I have for these guys in terms of how they play, I think Tate's just the better route runner against man. Lemon's a good route runner against zone. And I think that Tate does a little bit more, in those aspects of the game where you can be reliable in the timing passing game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at your scores. We are going to talk about Lemon next because he's next on your list. You like him. you're not calling. You're just saying he's not a super elite prospect, and you think Tate has the potential. We might be. We talk on the show a lot about how in fantasy, receiver has just become horrendous to draft. There's like 5 guys, 6 guys in a given year who justify sort of standing apart from the rest, and everything else is the infinite sadness. And so, of course, any of these guys, depending on a year-by-year situation, it's a possibility that they wind up joining that group. But I think from reading Tate's scores and the rate, you're giving him his player comparison spectrum is Randy Moss at the top, then Justin Jefferson, and he's got a chance to reach that level. That tells me here's a kid who legitimately can join that every year group of 5 guys at the top, and that's, especially if you're drafting a dynasty, that's like gold.
Yeah, this is to me, it's like the score that I gave him is in the same range as like Malik Neighbors, okay? Like instant star for that team. Like he should come in and right away look like the best receiver on that team unless he lands next to Justin Jefferson, or somebody of that caliber. And there's only like 5 or 6 of those guys, like you said. Whereas Makai Lemon, I have him as an instant starter, and he's actually, closer to the cusp of being a player like Tate on my board, but he's just not quite there. And I think it's because he's a little bit more scheme dependent in what he can and can't do. But he's a guy that you should also expect to deliver good numbers for you. And if he's on a team where he's got, 1 or 2 veteran receivers who are buffering him and he's getting really nice opportunities, he could be the leading point getter among rookies in fantasy. But as the career plays out, I would expect Tate to be the more skilled guy. And of course, when I do these pre-draft publication, I have a post-draft, and I start to account for draft capital and team fit. And if Carnell Tate lands in an awful situation and Makai Lemon ends up in a perfect situation, it's very possible that Lemon could be 1 and Tate be 2 on my board. But I would say right now I'm judging talent. And from a talent perspective, I think Tate has more of it.
We are sponsored by my great friends at Viore. Spring is coming. Some places it's already here. If you like working out, if you like looking good, or you just want something incredibly comfortable to lounge around in, I cannot recommend clothes from Viore more. I'm wearing the Ponto Performance joggers right now as I'm talking with you, as well as a Stratotech t-shirt. And kids, I have so many Viore clothes. I go to the gym most days. I am always wearing a Viore tank top or the Banks shorts. I swear by them. The clothes are so great, and they're a great company. You've heard me say it before. Support companies that are trying to do good. Viore clothes are made with recycled materials. You get a pair of those Banks shorts that I love so much. That's like 4 or 5 recycled plastic bottles. It's a great mission. And of course, it would not matter if the clothes weren't great, but try them yourself. The clothes are great, and get free shipping on orders over $75 when you go to VUORI.com/Harris. When you use that /Harris, you also get 20% off your first purchase. Can't recommend them enough. I have so much Viore clothing. 20% off your first purchase. VUORI.com/Harris. Okay, we're back with Matt, and we have talked about the number 1 receiver on his board. I frankly love the first edition of the RSP because we're not blinded by situation, because I care about their careers, as you were discussing before the break. So I love that we're kind of making the clear statement about Carnell Tate. 2 through 6 on this board, you consider to be kind of their own next tier, from what I understand from having read it myself. We'll take them in the order that you listed them. We'll go a little faster. You talked about Makai Lemon just a moment ago, and he is your number 2. He did not run at the combine, and then he ran like a 4.58 at his pro day, and so that set people, I guess, worrying. From what I've seen in consensus mock drafts, Makai Lemon's still the second receiver off the board, but I guess we could have people who get scared off by somehow a lack of speed. But as you say in the RSP, there is still a chance that he's Amon-Ra St. Brown, that he's that. If he falls like Amon-Ra did and then pops later, it'll be another example of the NFL industrial complex, like overthinking it.
I love how you term it. But yeah, it is. He's a He's a very good zone route runner. He's someone that goes up and wins the ball. He has really clutch moments on tape where you just watch repeatedly in big moments where they give him difficult targets that he has to make to change the outcome of the game, and he makes them repeatedly. And you see the run after the catch skill. He's a player that handles physical play well, and so that always stands up well in the NFL, is that you can take contact while you're catching a ball and making difficult catches and getting hit or between defenders, or defender wearing you like, or you wearing the defender like he's a glove or an outer layer of clothing. So I mean, he's very good in that respect. So I think, again, it's if the team that's thinking about taking him, I would have to think they're looking at him as a slot receiver, and not just strictly as a flanker. They're gonna say we can play him outside when we need to, when there's good matchups, but he's mainly a slot option. And if you don't get Tate and you can get Lemon, I would be very happy as a fantasy GM with that. So it's just one of those things that, yeah, the times aren't great, but as a slot receiver, you need to be quick. You need to have good acceleration. He has both of those things. It's just the long speed that doesn't hold up.
And of course, like this formal distinction between this guy has to always play in the slot, and this guy is always on the outside. I mean, there's just not that many receivers who conform to that anymore. There's so many receivers on the field in a lot of base formations that if he's good, he'll get used all over the place. And he's not tiny. He's not elite sized, but he's Amon-Ra sized. Like it's a pretty good, like model for him to follow. Where Amon-Ra's mostly out of the slot, but like they use him very creatively, and that would be a good hope for him. You like him a lot. Malachi Fields is third in this group for you. Notre Dame kid, another one who's not a spark darling, not a medalist in the underwear Olympics, as we would say. Big and slow. Cool. That's what people said about Nico Collins when he fell to whatever the fifth round or whatever it was. Reading around about Malachi Fields, because as I mentioned to you earlier and before we hit the button, I've never heard of the man because I don't know these players. I don't watch college football. I'm learning them right today. But I read around a little bit about Fields. I've seen comps like, great, Nico Collins might be his ceiling. I've seen like Michael Pittman as a medium comp, like that'd be pretty good. I've also seen people compare him to Nick Westbrook-Akine when they don't like him. I think from having read your profile of him, that's certainly not what you think about Malachi Fields.
No, and it's funny how people score the underwear Olympics because they only scored in the 40, which is the least important thing about wide receiver play. Like, really, you want acceleration, initial acceleration, and you want change of direction quickness. And if you were to score him in both those categories, he'd be starter level or elite. So they'd be the two highest categories, along with his vertical leap. So this is an explosive player in tight space, in the areas where if you're trying to face man-to-man coverage, combined with his size, his strength, and his technique, he has the athletic ability to get open. That's not a major concern. He's a former quarterback who converted to wide receiver at University of Virginia and then moved over to Notre Dame. And his quickness shows up on tape. You can really see how he gets separation and how also after he gets the ball in his hands that he can make multiple defenders miss in tight traffic. If he's not overpowering them, he can run away from them and make them miss. And he earns very good position on the football, and his routes are strong. So, like, I don't care if you run a 4.6, if your routes are, your route breaks are flat, your techniques are good, that you're maximizing separation. It's the quickness out of that change of direction that matters, and he has that, and the techniques support it. And when, I didn't go to the Senior Bowl this year, but it was interesting to have. I was talking to Dave Kluge last night, and Dave was talking about at the Senior Bowl, everyone there was saying Malachi Fields was the best receiver on the field in those practices because his routes were so good. And you could see how much separation he was getting from defenders who were playing him tight at the top of the stem. And then when he broke loose, and that's a meaningful aspect of actually watching a practice. In that setting is like if a player's playing you tight and you're able to get separation at the break point, that's much more impressive than what I always hear at the Senior Bowl, which is, oh, this guy is just separating from people left and right at the line of scrimmage, and his moves are so fantastic. And then you go and watch it, and you go, yeah, you're like, oh, Braxton Miller, former quarterback. It's a two-way go where the advantages to the receiver, and you're making up moves in a way that don't make any sense, and the ball would be arriving somewhere. You'd be late to the ball based on how many moves you made on the playground there trying to do that. And Malachi Fields isn't about this. Is a refined technician who also has size and quickness and short area explosion. And so I have him probably ranked higher than most people do. But I think, if his floor were Michael Pittman, it's going to be higher than Michael Pittman, because Pittman is not. Yeah,
Pittman's a good player, really good player. I mean, he never became like a true. I can rely on him to always be a wide receiver one, but for years came at a really good value. Might come at a really good value this year in the Steelers, but that would be, if that's his floor, that would be really good. And sounds like Fields is kind of the first player we can say to ourselves, all right, when we're watching the draft at the end of the month, let's see which team takes him in the second round, maybe the third round, and that can be maybe a value guy that we have our eyes on. Next in this group of 5 from 2 to 6 on your receiver list is Casey Concepcion, and he didn't participate in the measuring contest, as it were, because of a knee scope in early March. Oh no, how will I ever decide what I think of him if I can't look at his 3-cone time?
Maybe if you take the cone and you look it through the hole through your screen, you'll have more focus on being able to look at what you need to be looking at, and you won't be as distracted. I don't know.
But he's good, right? He's a good player. Texas
He's
A&M.
very good. Yeah, he's a very good player. He began his career at NC State, and I remember seeing him there, and they used him a lot as a running back at situationally. He's very patient as a runner. He has good short area quickness, has a good feel for how he, just how he carries the ball and judges angles of pursuit. And that helps him out a lot when he's in a lot, more open confines of, the middle of the field at the second and third levels of defenses. And he's a strong route runner. You could put him at flanker or in the slot. He's very agile and elusive. It's notable how quick he is when you watch him play, and his hands are good enough. And what I mean by that is that he's going to drop the ball. He had 17 drops, I think, over his career. And he does clap attack the ball at times where it's like, instead of having his fingertips together, he's trying to clap onto either side of that. And that's just a really inefficient way of making the catch. There are exceptions to that rule of players who are serial clap attackers, as I call it, who have turned out to be good. Concepcion doesn't always clap attack, but there's certain targets that every receiver has difficulty getting their hands together when it's, directly over their head, and they have to stretch, high and away. That can be a difficult play to get your technique perfect. And when his technique's not perfect and he claps, he tends to drop some of those targets. So, you may see some of that be magnified in the NFL as he's thinking through all the things that he has to kind of acclimate to at that level. But I think over the course of time, you're looking at a player who will probably be I would say I'd like to put him even with Khalil Shakir, because I like Khalil Shakir, but I think Buffalo doesn't use him to his maximum capacity. So I've said I put him a little bit above that. He's more like a guy that maybe you and I remember, but some of your newer subscribers might not remember, which is Steve Smith II, who was a former Giants receiver who was an absolute star at USC with Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush and guys like that. And he had a couple of really strong seasons before injuries hit with Eli Manning, where he could play inside, outside. He could get deep on you. He could get yards after the catch. He was tough at the catch point. I think Concepcion's kind of like that.
I've seen Stephon Diggs. For the people who really like Concepcion, I've seen Diggs as a like, if he's young Diggs, my God, that guy was unbelievable. He latter Diggs, since the knee injury for sure, is much more of a slot guy and still really good and very reliable to throw to. But if he can play inside outside to start, that'd be good. I've seen Concepcion go to the Patriots at 31 a fair amount, which would be of interest to your host today. Next on the list, from 2 through 6, you have Skyler Bell. I always like to look at the various, you rank various qualities in the RSP, and you try to put who's a star caliber in that particular skill. And you have the 6 or 7 of those, and Skyler Bell was a name that recurred a couple of times. Star caliber, elusiveness, and vision. So, I think, from what I've seen, Skyler Bell could be another one of those guys who's like one of your guys. I know you don't love ranks because ranks try to be one size fits all, and Skyler Bell is never going to be, T. Higgins. That's not his body type. He appears as like a round 3 pick on a lot of lists. But there's some real aspirational upside there for Skyler Bell.
There is, and I think that there's, Skyler Bell is one of those guys that's going to be that has been a hot name, I think, climbing draft boards in terms of the draft community in the past month and a half. But he's a little bit more risk reward only because we talked about clap attacking with KC Concepcion. Well, Skyler Bell is a serial clap attacker. And so that can be problematic because you think of Quentin Johnston, you think of what Marvin Harrison has struggled with at times. Marvin Harrison Jr., because we're going to talk about senior in a second. But those are guys that most receivers that their main method of catching the ball is clapping onto it, and they have high drop rates in college, tend to be guys that struggle with it in the NFL. But Bell, I think, might be the exception to the rule, and I rarely invoke any kind of exceptions with players, and it's not because I'm in love with like his athletic ability. It's mainly because when I look at the players that I studied who had fantasy production, even contributor level production and above, during the 21 years I've been doing it, I can count Jordyn Tate, Terry McLaurin, Early Doucette as the 3 guys who were serial clap attackers. That's generally their first way of trying to catch a ball with their technique, and they were good enough to have NFL production doing it. So I wanted to, and the other guy was Marvin Harrison Sr. Watching him, you go watch his highlights, and he looks like a better version of Terry McLaurin. I mean, that's basically, you're looking at it and going, God, that catch technique was outdated from like 1979. And there's a reason why, there's been upgrades in how people, catch the ball, but he's, was a Hall of Famer, all-time great. What they all have in common is that at least there were 2 things that most of them had in common that kind of overlap. Most of them could catch the ball with correct technique when needed, but they often just chose this clap attacking, trapping type of skill, and they were so good at it that their drop rates were not a big deal in college, and it translated to the NFL. Or they were players who could catch the ball with the good technique, and they didn't struggle. They didn't struggle with it. Like there were other clap attackers. Like when I watched guys like Robert Meacham way back in the day, or Quentin Johnston recently, when they tried to use correct technique, they couldn't do it well, and they had to revert back to doing this. And so when I see Skyler Bell, he has big hands. I watch him make really high-level catches with this trapping or clap attacking, but I also see that he can catch the ball with good technique and that he doesn't have a massive drop problem. I mean, he's dropped some, but it's not it's not as bad that I would be worried about it. So it's a bit of a risk to put him this high. If I didn't, he would probably be somewhere in my top 15 on the lower end of that, about 10 spots lower. And I'd say even then I have him higher than some people who have him probably inside their top 25 as a sleeper. But I think he's more of a, again, Khalil Shakir is a nice comparison point, but more dynamic. If you say Jamar...
You gave him Chase. I was about to say you gave him Chase as an aspirational upside. That's not what you're saying he's going to be, but like Jamar Chase is not a huge guy. He's just a monster. Like
that's right.
Like Jamar Chase, I think everybody now knows is like one of the best running backs in the league after the catch, and what you're trying to, I think, accomplish with the Skyler Bell by saying he has star caliber elusiveness and vision is that after the catch, if this guy is good enough to catch the ball, watch out.
Let me tell you, I'm just saying one last thing about Bell. I watched a play after I already graded him, and I was just looking for one thing in particular, and I happened upon a play against Boston College where he had to bend this run in the open field around a group of players in like the flat. And, when Dalvin Cook is a good example of curvilinear movement, being able to bend it, like think of a street motorcycle bending around a corner at high speed. That's what curvilinear movement is. And I have never seen any player bend an angle as tight, as sharp as he did, as Skyler Bell did on that play. I mean, it was an elite play all unto itself. I think I had to record it and put it on my list of links for the RSP to show some highlights to just make an example of that, because it was really to the extreme end of what he's able to show, what he's able to do, and just very impressive. And I think those are the kinds of things that if he's able to do some of this stuff in the NFL, he's going to be a big play specialist who can get the ball a lot, in terms of high volumes.
We are sponsored today by ZBiotics, the world's first genetically engineered probiotic, specifically created to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Truly, I cannot believe how well ZBiotics works. So I was out with a friend a couple of nights ago, and I realized, oh shoot, I'm having a couple of drinks, and I didn't remember to drink that little bottle of ZBiotics first, and it made a difference. I didn't feel as great the next morning. I've redoubled my promise to myself because for me, it works. When we drink alcohol, it gets converted in the gut to a toxic byproduct. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for rough mornings. So if I make ZBiotics my first drink of the night, which I will the next time I have alcohol, and I enjoy responsibly, I feel way better the next day. And I know how it sounds, but it really works. And there's no cost to trying it, because if you get some and it doesn't work for you, let ZBiotics know. They will refund you, no questions asked. So try pre-alcohol from ZBiotics when you go to zbiotics.com/Harris. You can learn more. Also, you can get 15% off your first order when you check out using the code Harris. You got nothing to lose except feeling bad a night after drinks. 15% off and a total happiness guarantee. Give it a try. zbiotics.com/Harris. Code Harris. Okay, we're back with Matt, and we have one more name who's in your top 6. And I don't think you dislike this player because you're rating him pretty high, but Jordyn Tyson is some people's number 1 wide receiver in this draft. You in his blurb in the rookie scouting portfolio, you say he could emerge as the best receiver in this class. I think it's funny you mentioned earlier who was the converted Ohio State quarterback you talked about in the Senior Bowl? Who was that? I forget.
Converted. Miller. Yeah, Braxton Miller. Yeah.
Like when you talked about how at the Senior Bowl he had a whole bunch of moves, but he didn't like put them together and coordinate them great, and that's sort of what always limited him. He just didn't have the thing to make it, to put it all together, to run the right route at the right time at the right pace. And if I don't think I want to damn Jordyn Tyson by saying that he's Braxton Miller, but if I can, I'm going to guess that in your mind, if you have questions about Tyson, it's that thing of putting all the things together and not doing everything a million miles an hour like your hair's on fire, like getting a better feel for the game.
Yeah, I would say that Miller's the extreme end of that, where it's like he didn't
Right.
know what he was doing, whereas Tyson knows what he's doing, but he hasn't refined what he's doing to the degree that he needs to. So there's a lot of loose ends with his game where he has some catch technique issues that are a problem. His releases, sometimes the way he pairs them isn't great, or that he uses a release where there's not enough patience and suddenness to contrast the moves. And that's important when you watch Devontae Adams one-on-one with defenders. Most of what he does is patient but sudden. That lures the defender in with a change of pace and really sets up the move. And the problem with Tyson is that he can be patient, but then the suddenness, what he chooses to be sudden with, is so quick that the defender can't even register that there was a fake. So it's like, it's almost like a subliminal message that he's sending, in a film, that you didn't see Brad Pitt do that thing in Fight Club, with the film. But maybe you were a little disturbed by it, but only after you just defended the pass. I think that's kind of what happens with Tyson, is that he needs to learn how to bleed the move at the right moment to really bait the defender. And then, so with the releases, routes, catching the ball, there's a little bit of work to do on that front, where I think those things keep him away from the instant starter level. He's just below that. And also the injury. If the injuries that he's had numerous injuries, and he still has a hamstring injury that he's been slow to work through, and it's still bothering him right now. And some of the thought is that because of the knee injury that he had, that it's also impacted him physically with his legs, and that maybe there's some chronic stuff going on that he might either have to work through or may have difficulty working through. So when you combine all that, to me, to put a guy number one overall with all of that happening, it's like he's a number one. He's a talent that's worth considering of having that upside, but he hasn't proven it yet. He's a highlight. I would call him the highlight number one. Or maybe there's some analytics that back up in certain contexts that, what he flashes that make him a number one. But there's got to be some availability is important and consistency is important. And so to me, he's a guy that you would much rather be taking, as your sixth or seventh receiver on the board, rather than making him one of your top 3 to 5, considering the risks that he hasn't shown.
I get it. I'm learning. That's the group that is its own sort of second tier, and then we get into players who you think have a really good chance to make pro careers and be on teams for a long time, and someone among them may crack and display something in the NFL they haven't shown and become the Puka Nacua, become the unexpected mid round superstar. I'll pick out a few names, but there are several dozen names that I really would want people go to mattwaldmanrsp.com. I want people to just get it because you get to read up on all of them. I'll pick out your 7 and your 8 are Chris Brazzell and Omar Cooper. I think I've seen Cooper mocked here and there as a first-round pick. People are going to remember him from Indiana from the national championship game. I saw Aaron Schatz have Omar Cooper as his number 2 receiver in the class. That's high. You have him 8. And then Brazzell, you have it 7. He's widely considered a second rounder. So I don't think, I don't think you're, in liking Cooper and Brazzell, I don't think you're like off from the market, but feel free to talk about them.
No, not at all. I mean, I think the difference is that if I'm a little lower on Cooper, it's because I keep hearing the Deebo Samuel comparison, but Deebo Samuel's 20 pounds heavier.
Okay.
And so I think that Cooper's a better route runner than Samuel. He's lighter. He breaks tackles, but I don't think he's going to be that level of a difference maker with the ball in his hand compared to what Deebo does. If there's a player that I'd compare him to, it'd probably be former Falcons receiver Roddy White, who was physical, but still someone that was more of a route runner than he was a get the ball to him in space and let him move and put him in the backfield, that kind of thing. So Cooper's good, and I think that he could probably start right now. He's got a grade that's similar to a guy like Jaden Reed. When you think of Jaden Reed, you know, I would argue the Packers should use him more and more extensively. But you hear a lot of arguments that they don't feel like he's the complete receiver to be their main guy. I think Cooper's probably a really strong wide receiver too, complement in an offense who can give you 800 to 1100 yards on during the peaks of his career, and maybe have a season that's even higher than that if he's in a great offense. But good fantasy proposition right there for sure. And then
Brazzell,
yeah, Brazzell's very talented. I joke that he's the winner. There's like 3 guys that I've compared stylistically to George Pickens, and also like maybe body type wise too. There's something to do with that. And I'd say he's the winner of the 3-man Pickens lookalike contest in this class. But he's more than just a sideline rebounder. He does run slants and over routes. You see some good skills with his ability to break on the ball. And, overall, I think that there's a lot of promise with his game. People get worried about people logo scout, meaning that they look at the team that the player came from and they look at the past success or failures of other prospects and they try to lump them all together. I would say that Brazzell's kind of a victim of logo scouting because he was at Tennessee, but he also played at Tulane before that and played well at Tulane. And also, he's a different receiver than than some of the guys that have come out recently, like Josh Palmer or the kid from the New York Giants, who's the deep threat that people really liked. What was it, Jalen? I don't remember his name. Jalen. Yeah. So I mean, you look at guys like that, and I think that Brazzell's a different type of player. And you look at him at his merits, and I would say this is a guy who has a very good chance to become a future starter, and maybe a future starter in year 1.
So a name that folks are going to probably, if they're familiar with this receiver draft, which let me just emphasize, I absolutely was not until a couple of days ago. But the name that the folks who are draft enthusiasts who see get mocked in the first round in basically every single mock draft, we have not yet talked about, which means, you don't love ranks, and I understand why, because they're very binary, and different players may fit different teams and different roles and different systems in different ways. But Denzel Boston, a consensus top 5 wide receiver across many, many ranks that I've surfed around and looked at over the past couple of days. You have him wide receiver 14. That is a lot lower. You are making a statement, even though I don't think you're saying he's guaranteed to be terrible, and he certainly could find a home in the NFL that does him great, and he learns to be better, etc. I don't think by putting him 14 you hate him, but where do your doubts lie?
Yeah, I mean it's really, I'll put it to you this way. This is why I like to talk about my depth of talent score, because that is a better reflection than the rank, because he's literally one tier different from being inside my top 7. I mean, so it's not that much of a difference, but that's why, again, that's the narrow margin of fit and draft capital matter. But I think for him, what I didn't see, I think the power is very good in terms of being able to break tackles. The durability, he had some injury that basically cost him a little bit on that. So if he stays healthy and he shows a little bit more after the catch, really those 2 things right there would have put him at a starter grade at 85. And at 85, he would have been wide receiver 6. So that tells you how much of how much of a narrow margin for error there is when it comes to the difference between rankings with players. That's all it is that, I had to mark down on his injuries because he missed a significant amount of time that required some rehab. So that's a difference. And that usually we don't know whether that really increases the chance for further injury, but it is a track record availability thing. And then when you take a look at his vision, a lot of what he's used to do is, at the catch point and not what he does after the catch point. So, he could end up with a higher score there, but as an evaluator, and you have to have a system of how you do things, I can't give a guy credit for something that I didn't see him do. I mean, you could do that, but I find that creates more issues for you long term. It's better to have a philosophy of like, what I saw, you've got to prove it to me by doing it on the field. But otherwise, his routes are good. He separates very well. He's got better separation than probably about, the 4 or 5 guys ranked ahead of him right now. His routes are as good as theirs, and his hands are, top tier, or very close to that. So you can see that, one of the things that I wrote in my pitch with Boston was like, if you rank him wide receiver 5, I have no argument with that. But you just have to understand that there's that I see him as a safe receiver, but there were some things that just were missing that I couldn't see, or that we have to wait and see how he holds up, in terms of his health, and that's the big difference there.
So if I were to make a contention to you, not knowing these players, not having watched them in college, but having read your RSP very, very closely, if I made the extrapolation from having read their respective profiles that actually Matt thinks Malachi Fields is kind of a better version of what people say Denzel Boston is going to be.
I would say they're closer than you think, and I would say that's probably true. I'm betting on that. For sure. But I would say that the difference is less than you think. Okay. Or less than I'm portraying. Less than I'm portraying it. Because most people are thinking Boston's ahead of them. But I would say most people who are reading this, what they should see is, Matt has him ranked 14th, but he said if you ranked him top 5, I wouldn't have arguments. So there's not much of a difference. How that may play out post-draft is that Boston may have a higher ranking, but if you could wait on him, you probably won't be able to wait on him, but Malachi Fields might be the bargain pick, like you might be able to get him 2 rounds later and be thrilled with what you got.
So Chris Bell is another name I wanted to mention. He's certainly within your top 10. I think you think he's graded as though he's going to be a starter, a rotational type starter. He had a knee injury last year. There's some thought that he would have been a clear first rounder without that knee injury. I think, again, you probably are. You'd love to have seen him play the full season and been able to evaluate, but because you can't quite go there with Chris Bell as like an NFL draft first rounder.
No, I can't. And even if he was healthy the entire year, he's probably the scariest player on the board, mainly because he's the player that I don't usually have this in a given year, but if I have I might name this after him as things turn out. I hope it's for the good side, but it's generally, if there's a player that I'm equally scared to draft as much as I am not to draft him, it would be Bell, because palpable speed. You just see it when he runs a crossing route and watch him split a defense at 6'2", 222. It's awesome. When he's doing everything the way he's supposed to do it, he has good hands, and he can run some good routes. But the problem is that there's a lot of sloppy play and inconsistent play with his game. And so that's what kind of keeps him out of that starter tier. He's not far away, so he's still in that range of players that could start right away when they get onto the field and work their way into, more consistent play. But he's also one of those guys that you look at and go, is it always going to be sloppy for him because he leans on that athletic talent? Because it's sloppy right now, and that's what he's got to prove, is that he can tighten up all aspects of his game and not just be a highlight reel guy who makes an incredible play or has an incredible series or an incredible game, but he's not putting together week to week or even play to play.
So I picked out a couple of, just by way of finishing up here, I picked out a couple of players who I think you might be a little higher on, even though you have them as, mid round, later round kind of picks. Just for kind of sleeper purposes, these are not players that you like better than the bigger names who are right ahead of them, just names that might not get mentioned in a survey of the overall, 10 or 15 best receivers that everyone's going to have. So I'll give you a couple names, and then I'll let you name any others that you want to. Just briefly, can you give me a little rundown on Kevin Coleman?
Yeah, he played at Mississippi State and then moved to Missouri, and he's kind of a bargain version of, possibly a bargain version of KC Concepcion. But more from a slot version. Very quick, good hands, and I think that he's one of those guys that may be able to play a little bit more flanker. Think like Jalen Naylor as a guy as his floor, and before Naylor ends up with playing in Las Vegas and seeing what happens from there. But think Naylor with the Vikings as his floor, and Jaden Reed as the ceiling that might be a little bit difficult to attain, but he'll be closer to that than he will be to Naylor's floor. How
about Junior? Am I saying it right? Vandeross?
Yeah. Though I keep wanting to say Vandeross, but that's just because, that's because of my wife's listening choices at home. And if I could, I won't even try. But I still think of my days working at a fast food restaurant and hearing all the middle-aged women yelling Luther, But Junior was. I would put it this way. He's a tough receiver for his size, 5'8", 182, who, if Wan'Dale Robinson didn't play at Kentucky and instead played at like a mid-major and didn't have the draft capital, I think you would still say Junior Vandeross was probably a little better. Or Junior Vandeross wound up at a Power 5 school and played the way he did on tape, he would compare favorably to Robinson. He just doesn't have the pedigree. But think of him in that idea of like Greg Dortch is the floor, type of player. Wan'Dale being the thing about Vandeross that's better than Wan'Dale is that Wan'Dale's great in zone. He's gotten a lot better with running routes overall. But I think Vandeross uses his speed and his ability at the catch point better to win timing routes and to win downfield in a way that I think Robinson might be a little more limited. There's probably a better chance that he becomes a star in the CFL without draft capital. I liked when Wan'Dale came out, Wan'Dale, Calvin Austin, and Khalil Pimpleton were all back to back on my rankings, and they were all about the same size, had similar speed, and I was like, I like Calvin Austin, and I like Khalil Pimpleton more than I liked Wan'Dale, and they were all, in the same grouping just because of what they could bring to their games. And Pimpleton was like a star return man, and Pimpleton's a star in the CFL, I think, at this point, or he's a standout player, but he never really got that opportunity. Austin has had some of the opportunities, but injury and just hasn't. He's flashed more than he's been able to sustain. So Vandeross is probably in that group. You just keep an eye out for him. If he's making noise in camp, then he's someone to pay attention to. Maybe you can add him for nothing as a sleeper, free agent that you on your expanded roster during the summer, and no harm, no foul if you have to cut him.
Right. Any other names that you just feel like it would be a shame if we didn't mention?
I think Eric McAlister out of TCU is a fun one because he's 6'4", 194. He plays with power. He's smooth. He can win the ball well. He just has to become a better route runner and just run different types of routes. And I think that he's someone that could wind up becoming a really good number 2 one day. And that's a nice kind of player to consider later on. Other than that, I mean, most of these guys, maybe, if I'm going to give one that would be a fun late round guy, it's Illinois State's Daniel Sobkowicz, who I've joked Chris that like if the RSP won the lottery as a business, how that can happen would be funny. But won the lottery as a business, and I could buy it myself an island, and I had RSP Island, I would hold the Brandon Lloyd Acrobatic Catch Invitational. It'd be like the geeky version of the football slam dunk contest, and we'd have one-on-ones, throwing the ball up and that kind of thing, and we judge the difficulty of the catch, and we'd use instant replay. We wouldn't, but we would have Daniel Sobkowicz would be like the dark horse in the college division of the event. He is 6'3", 205. He makes one-handed grabs that look like he's got like arms that pop out of his side that are in addition to what he does. He's great in that respect, and he's got some pretty compelling routes in terms of what he can do with his breaks and with the discipline of his stem work. He just needs to become a little bit more creative within the bounds of how the route's being run to truly bait defenders. And at the catch point, as good as he is at making the acrobatic grabs, he needs to get a little stronger with his wrists and his forearms, and so that he can stabilize the ball better when defenders swat his hands, wrists, and forearms, and when they're tight to him at the catch point. That's where he drops the ball, is in that specific instance. But otherwise, this is one of those players that you look at and say, he could be a better version of Corey Davis at some point. And Corey Davis, I know, didn't pan out to what people wanted him to be as a first-round pick with the Titans. But he could be a player that's taken as a UDFA, signed as a UDFA or a 6th or 7th round pick, who ends up becoming a higher-end contributor if he can just kind of improve those two aspects of his game.
Well, we will keep track of whether he gets taken, and he's Matt's wide receiver 36 in this class, and the list goes a lot deeper than that, which is by way of saying he knows everything about all these players and has watched film on all of them. And there's no better resource if you're in a dynasty league. Just stop what you're doing right now. Matt Waldman, RSP.com. I know many, many, many of the Yacht Possums who've listened over the years have become repeat customers of the RSP. Always let Matt know where you heard about him. It's because we love to let him know that our listeners are getting them.
And I love hearing it.
Yeah, Rookie Scouting Portfolio. It's really great stuff. And every year you begin to introduce me to these players. I can't thank you enough for doing it again. And having gone through this, I now know so much more about these players to make smart decisions as we get into the summer. Thank you very much for doing it, Matt. I know this is the beginning of your incredibly, you finally released it, but now, it's out there and you're going to have to do 1 million appearances. You'll be on tons of shows. Making mine one of the first is always an honor. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure, and I appreciate everybody who's been subscribed, and I appreciate you, Chris, for having me on all these years. And that's why I've trained my dog that he can hunt groundhogs, but he's got to stay away from the possums.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank heavens the possums of the southeastern United States are healthy. Let me thank the 3 sponsors that also made today's show possible. You've heard me in the past talk about Viore. Really recommend those clothes. Check them out. Z-Biotics. Really recommend the pre-alcohol from Z-Biotics. Works really well. Need to remember to take it. And we had a new sponsor, Fume. And if you're looking to quit vaping or quit smoking, or someone you love is in that situation, check out Try Fume. That's a new sponsor that I hope does well on the show. You can find a full list of all the current sponsors at harrisfootball.com. I will remind you that all the names Matt talked about on today's show are in today's show notes, so hopefully you did not crash your car writing the names down. They're all sitting there in the show notes. That's going to do it for this episode. Now, coming up on the Yacht Club on Monday, I think it's a record in the 11, years of doing this show. I've been on all of them. But on Monday, I will not be on the show. Andy Behrens is going to run his own Yacht Club episode. It's going to be more draft talk. It's going to be with Eric Edholm, and I think you'll want to listen to it because Eric is also deep down in the weeds with the NFL draft and has some takes on these players. So check out that Yacht Club episode. You can find out how to subscribe at harrisfootball.com. And then we'll all meet back here, including me, next week, next Thursday, the 9th of April, where we'll look at the rookie running backs with my buddy Paul Perdichizzi of the Saturday to Sunday Notebooks fame. I know you'll enjoy that one as well. Until then, thanks again so much for listening. Your hat is awesome. You're awesome for wearing it. I will talk to you next time.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The closing theme is Say Yes by The Wellspring. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.